No body, no crime. This chilling phrase, muttered months before a horrific betrayal, was a philosophy of absolute arrogance built on the belief that if you burn the evidence to ash, justice becomes blind. But on Thanksgiving morning in 2018, this dark philosophy would collide with a relentless web of digital forensics, a toxic double life, and a bloody cleanup that shocked the nation. This is the complete account of Kelsey Bereth, a 29-year-old mother and flight instructor who walked into her own home to play an innocent holiday game, completely unaware that her fiancé had spent months orchestrating her execution, or that his secret collaborator was already waiting in the shadows. On Thanksgiving morning, November 22, 2018, the quiet mountain community of Woodland Park, Colorado, was setting into its peaceful holiday routines. At around noon, surveillance video outside a local furniture store along Highway 24 captured 29-year-old Kelsey Bereth, a beautifully composed and exceptionally grounded flight instructor at DOS Aviation in Pueblo, driving her red Chevrolet Silverado truck back toward her home. She had just finished shopping at a local Safeway grocery store, with her 1-year-old daughter, Kaylee, buying ingredients to prepare a sweet potato casserole for the family holiday dinner. Kelsey, who stood 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed 110 pounds, was wearing a white shirt, a gray sweater, and blue pants that morning. Her loved ones remembered her not as a delicate or fragile person, but as a resilient, hard-working individual raised on a family hay farm in Moses Lake, Washington State, where she spent her youth comfortably driving tractors and bucking hay bales, completely fascinated by the world of aviation. Earlier that morning, Kelsey spoke with her mother, Cheryl Bereth, sounding entirely happy, stable, and displaying zero signs of domestic stress or an intention to leave. She subsequently sent a brief, affectionate text message to her fiancé, Patrick Frazee, letting him know she had purchased sweet potatoes in case he wanted any casserole for their holiday plans. Just 8 minutes after Kelsey's truck passed the furniture store camera, Patrick Frazee's red Toyota Tacoma pickup truck was captured traveling in the opposite direction toward her condominium, with a large black plastic tote box already visible in the truck bed. At 12:42 p.m., Frazee pulled up to a drive-through ATM at the ENT Credit Union, where he spent 8 minutes executing transactions. At 12:46 p.m., the automated camera attached to the machine snapped a clear photo of Frazee looking directly into the screen, with his baby daughter visible sitting in the front seat of the cabin, mere feet away from the murder apparatus gathering in the truck bed. At 1:23 p.m., a neighbor's security camera captured Kelsey, Patrick, and their infant daughter standing together outside the front door of her condominium. Kelsey was carrying a red poinsettia plant she had just purchased at Safeway along with a baby carrier. This recorded moment would stand as the final time anyone saw Kelsey Bereth alive in public. Her suitcases, her vehicles, her keys, and her makeup remained completely untouched inside her home, with only her purse and phone missing from the residence, signaling a sudden and ominous interruption to her life. For 10 long days, an absolute and terrifying silence blanketed Kelsey's condominium. Her mother, residing out of state, made continuous desperate attempts to reach her, but every single call went straight to voicemail, and messages left by panicked family members received no response. On December 2, 2018, Cheryl Bereth officially reported her daughter missing to the Woodland Park Police Department, initiating what would quickly become one of the most complex homicide investigations in the region. When investigators first questioned Patrick Frazee, a 32-year-old cowboy and rancher who lived on an expansive 35-acre property in Florissant, Colorado, he spun an elaborate, highly calculated narrative to deflect suspicion. Frazee claimed that Kelsey had broken up with him on Thanksgiving Day, handing off their daughter to him before abruptly leaving the area with a friend or coworker to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. He falsely told police that he was deeply worried about her safety, alleging that they had split custody 50-50 and had continued to communicate off and on via text messages and phone calls for 3 days after the holiday. He even shared a fabricated rumor with his brother Sean Frazee, claiming that Kelsey had missed their holiday dinner because she had abruptly left town to visit an ailing grandmother. The early electronic data seemed to align perfectly with his story, as text messages sent from Kelsey's phone implied she was taking intentional time off from work and had left town voluntarily. Furthermore, cellular tracking revealed that the victim's mobile phone was actively pinging off a tower near Gooding, Idaho, hundreds of miles away from her Colorado condo. However, veteran investigators quickly recognized severe inconsistencies in his story. A grounded, deeply responsible mother would never abandon her toddler daughter without a trace, nor would she text her fiancé about holiday casserole preparation if they had just undergone a volatile, permanent separation that very morning. The child recovery and missing person investigation took a dark criminal turn when digital forensics and cell phone records exposed a hidden collaborator in Patrick Frazie's life. Authorities discovered that Frazee had been in constant contact with a mistress named Crystal Jean Lee Kenny, a 32-year-old nurse from Hanson, Idaho, who was employed at St. Luke's Magic Valley Medical Center in Twin Falls. Crystal and Patrick shared a highly toxic, on-and-off relationship that spanned 13 years, beginning in 2006 and persisting throughout Crystal's subsequent failed marriage to another man. At one point during their long-standing affair, Crystal became pregnant with Frazee's child, but she ultimately aborted the pregnancy at his explicit request, illustrating the deep psychological control he held over her. When they reconnected heavily in 2018, Crystal claimed she was initially oblivious to his engagement. But Patrick quickly began playing systematic head games to completely manipulate her actions. He fabricated a malicious, calculated narrative, claiming that Kelsey was an abusive mother who was actively endangering their little girl. Under the guidance of Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent John Grusing, the tracking team uncovered how Frazee convinced Crystal that Kelsey would hurt the baby, or worse, weaponizing his daughter's safety to compromise Crystal's judgment. Overruled by a blind, obsessive affection that completely shattered her common sense, Crystal became an active participant in an ongoing, multi-day effort to execute a series of premeditated murder plots orchestrated by Frazee between September 1 and November 1, 2018. The terrifying extent of Patrick Frazee's calculation was laid bare through 3 separate occasions where he tried to convince Crystal to murder his fiancée. The first plot developed in September 2018, when Frazee asked Crystal what specific combination of drugs could successfully end a human life, looking to utilize her medical background. He then commanded her to poison Kelsey's favorite Starbucks drink, a caramel macchiato, utilizing easy-to-access pharmaceuticals. Crystal went so far as to drive to Kelsey's condo pretending to be a new neighbor and delivered the coffee. But she ultimately backed out of placing the lethal sedatives inside because she wanted to observe Kelsey and form her own opinion. The very next day, a furious Frazee called Crystal to demand why Kelsey was still alive. Undeterred by the failure, Frazee initiated a second plot, handing Crystal a heavy metal steel rod and instructing her to strike Kelsey on the head inside her residence. Crystal drove to the condo with the weapon, but panicked again, returning to Frazee's home and leaving the metal pipe abandoned in his driveway, which prompted another furious, retaliatory phone call from her lover. In the third solicitation, Frazee instructed Crystal to wait outside Kelsey's home with an aluminum baseball bat and swing away at her. Crystal refused to execute the strike, claiming she grew intensely spooked when a local police cruiser drove past the neighborhood. Enraged by her continuous failures, Frazee threatened Crystal, telling her he would hold her feet to the fire and blame her entirely if anything happened to his daughter. Terrified for her own safety but desperate to keep Frazee out of trouble, Crystal kept silent and did not alert law enforcement. While hospital spokeswoman Michelle Bartlome later confirmed, Crystal was placed on a leave of absence before being permanently terminated from her nursing position. The wrongful death lawsuit filed later by Kelsey's parents officially revealed the dark financial and social motive behind the crime, proving that Patrick Frazee killed Kelsey over a bitter child custody dispute involving their 1-year-old daughter, Kaylee. Frazee wanted absolute, full custody of the child, or wanted Kelsey to leave the baby with him permanently, which Kelsey flatly refused to agree to. Financial audits executed by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation exposed an additional motive. Frazee was drowning in a severe financial crisis, having defaulted on a massive $72,000 loan that carried a final non-negotiable payment deadline on December 1, 2018, just days after the holiday. To preserve his cash, Frazee had also systematically cut his agreed $700 monthly child support payments to Kelsey, shorting her during the summer before completely withholding all financial support after July. Realizing he could not control the legal or financial outcomes, Frazee chose absolute destruction. On November 4, 2018, Patrick Frazee called Crystal to coldly state that he was going to act on his own. On Thanksgiving Day, he carried out his monstrous plan by lulling Kelsey into a false sense of absolute security inside her own home. Frazee covered Kelsey's eyes with a sweater under the false ruse of playing a game of guessing the scent of different candles. The exact moment Kelsey was completely blindfolded and defenseless, Frazee grabbed a baseball bat and began swinging with absolute ferocity. He bludgeoned his fiancée to death, striking her between 10 and 15 times with savage force. During her final moments on the witness stand, Crystal Kenny wept openly as she revealed the absolute horror of Kelsey's final words. As the baseball bat struck her repeatedly, Kelsey Barrett did not scream in anger, but instead uttered two heartbreaking final words: "Please stop." All the while, their 1-year-old daughter, Kaylee, sat nearby in a playpen inside the home's back office room, completely trapped as her mother was murdered. After the attack, Frazee packed Kelsey's lifeless body into the large black plastic tote bag and loaded it into the bed of his pickup truck. Neighbors' security cameras activated 27 times that afternoon, capturing Frazee alone at 4 p.m. as he transferred the remains. Unfathomably, with the body of his murdered fiancée hidden in the back of his vehicle, Frazee drove away to have a traditional Thanksgiving dinner with his own family, leaving his daughter in temporary safety. Immediately after committing the murder on November 22, Frazee called Crystal in Idaho and delivered a chilling command, telling her that he had a mess to clean up and she needed to get to Colorado immediately. Fearing that Frazee would target her next if she dared to disobey, Crystal packed rubber gloves, a hospital gown, bleach, trash bags, and protective booties, arriving at the crime scene on November 24. Armed with a key Frazee had provided, she unlocked the door to Kelsey's condo and walked into a scene of utter horror. Senior Deputy District Attorney Jennifer Veman described the absolute brutality encountered inside the room, revealing a massive pool of blood covering the living room floor. With crimson splatters coating the walls, the couch, the television, the tables, the front of the kitchen stove, and the dishwasher. The trauma was so severe that the blood had seeped deeply beneath the living room floorboards. Frazee had previously made a desperate attempt to clean the area using simple baby wipes but had failed completely due to the sheer volume of the blood. Crystal spent hours meticulously scrubbing the residence with bleach and Kelsey's own cleaning products, bagging up items that were too saturated to clean, including bloodied pillows and toys. As she worked, Frazee called her, warning her to leave absolutely no trace behind and instructing her to look specifically for any of Kelsey's knocked-out teeth on the floorboards. Amid the horrific process, Crystal intentionally left a small patch of blood specks near the fireplace and the baby gate, silently hoping that investigators would eventually discover them. Surveillance cameras later recorded Crystal driving through a local Sonic drive-thru to purchase food immediately after finishing the gruesome scrubbing. Once the cleanup was complete, Crystal retrieved the keys from Frazee's ranch, and together they loaded the bags of contaminated evidence, the baseball bat, and the black plastic tote containing Kelsey's remains onto his 35-acre fluorescent ranch. They set the pile ablaze, utilizing gasoline Frazee had purchased at a Conoco station. The fire was so massive and intense that Frazee's mother, Sheila Frazee, walked out onto the front porch to witness the destructive flames, though she later chose to plead the Fifth Amendment during preliminary hearings to avoid incriminating her son. The inferno completely consumed Kelsey's body, the bat, the baby toys, Kelsey's bloody Bible, and the very clothes Crystal had worn during the cleanup. To complete the deception, Frazee commanded Crystal to take Kelsey's phone back to Idaho to create a deceptive electronic trail. On November 23, both phones pinged off the exact same cellular tower near Frazee's home, exposing the reality that the devices were physically together. By November 25, Crystal drove westward, carrying Kelsey's phone across state lines. Under Frazee's strict orders, she sent misleading text messages from the victim's phone to Frazee, typing out the words, "Do you even love me anymore?" to fabricate a fake narrative of a living, emotional woman. She also texted Kelsey's employer at Doss Aviation to falsely state she would be missing work for the upcoming week. Once she reached the area of Gooding, Idaho, Crystal threw away Kelsey's keys and burned the mobile phone to ashes before returning to her normal life. This elaborate ruse initially misdirected the search, but it ultimately became a forensic trap. Investigators tracking the pings noted that Kelsey's phone and Crystal's personal device were traveling along the exact same high-speed coordinates across hundreds of miles, directly linking the mistress to the disappearance. On December 6, 2 weeks after the murder, Kelsey's family entered the condo and discovered traces of blood in the bathroom, noting a missing bath mat. Colorado Bureau of Investigation agent Greg Slater conducted a thorough luminal test, illuminating an extensive profile of Kelsey's blood DNA across the toilet, trash can, floor, walls, door, towel rack, and vanity, completely shattering any possibility of a voluntary departure. During the preliminary proceedings, Frazie's defense attorney, Adam Steigerwald, aggressively attacked this phone evidence, cross-examining the prosecution on the exact number of cell towers in the area, and pointing to hundreds of unverified tips of sightings to create reasonable doubt, but the forensic timeline held firm. Patrick Frazee was arrested on December 21, 2018 at his ranch and formally charged under two distinct legal theories: first-degree murder after deliberation, and felony murder during the commission of a robbery, along with multiple counts of solicitation. He maintained his innocence and pleaded not guilty, banking on the fact that authorities had yet to discover Kelsey's physical remains. However, his defense completely crumbled during a gripping 10-day trial at the Teller County Courthouse in October 2019. Crystal Kenny served as the prosecution's primary witness, wiping away tears as she walked the jury through the grisly details of the cleanup and the multi-day effort to conceal the homicide. Further damaging testimony came from Frazie's lifelong friend, Joseph Moore, who revealed to the jury that months prior to the crime, Frazee had chillingly uttered the phrase, "No body, no crime," exposing his long-standing premeditation. Additionally, a jailhouse inmate testified that while incarcerated with Frazee between September and October 2019, the disgraced rancher had actively tried to solicit him to murder various key witnesses in the case, including Crystal, in a desperate bid to silence the state's evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before delivering a unanimous guilty verdict. The judge sentenced Patrick Frazee to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 156 years. Frazee remains incarcerated at the Arkansas Valley Correctional Facility in Crowley County, Colorado. Crystal Kenny secured a plea deal, pleading guilty to a single felony count of tampering with physical evidence in exchange for her critical testimony. At her sentencing hearing, Judge Scott Sells fiercely rebuked her actions, calling them cold, calculating, and cruel, stating that simply saying sorry was not enough for an ongoing, multi-day effort that spanned hundreds of miles. She was sentenced to the maximum term of 3 years at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility. However, in February 2021, an appeals court ruled her 3-year sentence unconstitutional because the judge had exceeded standard sentencing guidelines for her specific charge. She was resentenced to 18 months and officially released on parole on March 23, 2021. To this day, the physical remains of Kelsey Barrett have never been recovered, leaving a permanent scar on the hearts of her loved ones. Permanent custody of her daughter, Kaylee, was granted to Kelsey's grieving parents, Cheryl and Daryl Barrett, who also launched a successful wrongful death lawsuit against the convicted killer to protect the child's future. The dark legacy of Thanksgiving 2018 stands as an ominous case study in the destructive nature of domestic manipulation and the extreme lengths of narcissistic violence. Patrick Frazee's horrific catchphrase of "no body, no crime" was thoroughly dismantled by the relentless precision of modern forensics and cellular tracking, proving that the absence of a body cannot shield a killer from the weight of justice. The tragedy leaves behind profound and unyielding lessons for the modern world. It demands an absolute refusal to ignore a history of toxic control or dark warning signs, reminding us that an individual who attempts to solicit the murder of their partner will always harbor a dangerous, escalating potential for lethality. It issues a stark warning to recognize the severe danger of manipulative relationships and toxic control within domestic partnerships, urging individuals to establish unyielding boundaries and seek immediate legal intervention before it is too late. True justice demands that we permanently turn away from the sensationalized media that romanticizes dangerous predators, and instead dedicate our collective memory to honoring the bright, hardworking, and innocent life of Kelsey Barrett, whose memory remains forever pure beneath the open Colorado sky.